alors qu'une
fire,
telle frappe aurait
even though
provoqué
such
un
a
feu
strike would
dont
have
les
caused a
conséquences auraient été
fire,
bien plus graves
and the
pour les
consequences would have
populations civiles.
been much more serious for the civilian population.
D'autre part, il s'agit d'une zone où
Furthermore, this is
l'armée
an
et
area
l'aviation
where the
syrienne
Syrian
sont
army
précisément en train
and
d'opérer,
Air Force
et
are in
d'ailleurs
fact
de nouvelles
operating,
frappes
and in
ont
fact,
été observées dans la
additional
région d'Idlib
strikes were
hier.
observed in the area of Idlib yesterday.
Enfin, la responsabilité des
Finally,
forces aériennes
the
syriennes
responsibility of
a
the
d'ores et
Syrian
déjà
Air
été mise
Force
en cause pour
has
l'usage de chlore comme arme
already
chimique, à 3
been
reprises
mentioned
au
for the
moins,
use of
de
chemical
manière
weapons three
irréfutable,
times at least,
par
and
les conclusions du
irrefutably
mécanisme d'enquête
based
conjoint
on the
mandaté par ce
conclusions of the
Conseil, le
joint
GIM.
investigative mechanism mandated by this council.
Les atrocités d'hier, qui
The
sont constitutives
atrocities
de
committed
crimes de
yesterday,
guerre,
which constitute
s'ajoutent
crimes
aux
of
nouveaux
war,
soupçons d'usage
are
de
to be
chlore
added to
à la fin du
further
mois dernier
suspicion of the
et
use
aux
of chlorine
multiples
at the
cas
end of
rapportés
last
depuis
month, and
plusieurs
multiple
mois,
cases
en
that have been
particulier à
reported over the
Alep
past few
au mois de
months, in
décembre
particular in
2016.
Aleppo during
Ces
December of
atrocités, Madame la
2016. These
Présidente,
atrocities,
illustrent
Madam
tragiquement
President,
la folie
illustrate
destructrice du régime de Bachar
tragically
el-Assad
the destructive
que même ses soutiens,
folly
nous le
of the
voyons aujourd'hui, ne sont pas en
Assad
mesure
regime.
d'empêcher
And
et
even
dont le
those
silence
who support that
équivaut à
regime can't
cautionner
prevent
ces actes
these
barbares.
atrocities. In fact, their silence is a kind
Ce
of
nouveau déchaînement de
justification
violence
for this
confirme
barbarous action.
que tant
This
qu'il n'y aura pas
new
eu de transition politique crédible,
act of
nul ne
barbarism
pourra
once again
garantir la
proves
paix
that
et la
until there
sécurité du
is
peuple syrien,
a true
ni le retour à la
political
stabilité
transition, no one can
du
guarantee the
Moyen-Orient.
security and safety of the
Il faut
Syrian
donc
people or
mettre en
the
œuvre
stability
sans
of the
délai
Middle East.
la transition
So,
politique que ce
a
Conseil
political
a
transition
souhaité et
must be put
approuvé
into place as soon
en
as
adoptant
possible.
à
That this
l'unanimité la
council
résolution
approved
2254
by
et
adopting
le
Resolution
communiqué de Genève.
2254 and
C'est
the
depuis
Geneva Communique.
l'origine la position de la France.
That has been
Madame la
the
Présidente, toute
position
la
of France
lumière doit
from the
être
very
faite
beginning.
au plus
Madam
vite sur les
President,
détails de ce massacre ignoble.
light should be
L'OIAC
shed
s'est
fully on the
immédiatement
details
saisi de
of
ces
this
allégations.
horrible massacre. The
Mon
OPCW
pays apporte
immediately
son
got
plein
to work
soutien à la
on
mission
this, and we
d'établissement des faits de l'OIAC
fully
et au
support
mécanisme
the
conjoint de
fact-finding
l'ONU
mission of
et
the
de l'OIAC
OPCW
pour
and
qu'ils
the
puissent enquêter au plus
GIM
vite.
so that they could investigate
L'ensemble
as soon as
des
possible.
allégations d'utilisation
All
d'armes
the
chimiques
allegations on the
doit
use of
faire
chemical
l'objet d'une
weapons
enquête et d'un suivi
must ready to assume that kind of
Madame la Présidente,
responsibility
il
in
y a
the face
quelques
of history.
semaines, j'appelais ici
Madam
même
President,
chacun
just a
d'entre
few
nous
weeks ago, I
à
called on
mesurer
all of us
et à assumer
here,
ses
each
responsabilités.
one of us, to
Ne nous y trompons
assume
pas,
our
l'absence
responsibility.
de consensus
And
au sein de ce
we should
Conseil
make no
le
mistake,
28 février
lack
dernier
of
pour
consensus in this
sanctionner
council on
l'usage
the
avéré
20th of
d'armes chimiques
February
par le régime
of this
syrien
year
a déjà
to
constitué,
sanction and
malheureusement,
condemn the
un
use of
signal
chemical weapons by
fort
the Syrian regime
d'impunité.
already
Le
was
massacre
sending a
abject
strong
de
message of
Han
impunity.
Sheikhoun
The
est un
horrible
terrible
massacre of
rappel
Han
à la
Sheikhoun
réalité et à
is
notre
a
responsabilité
terrible reminder
Le
of
moment est
the
donc
reality
venu
and a call to our collective
d'agir
responsibility. The
collectivement,
time has
en
come for us to
conscience,
act
avec toute la fermeté
collectively
requise face
with
à
all
l'utilisation d'armes de
necessary
destruction massive.
firmness in the face of the
Je
use
forme
of
l'espoir que
weapons
nous
of mass
pourrons
destruction. And I
enfin
would like to
nous
express the
rassembler
hope that we can
pour
at last
réaffirmer ensemble
join and
l'interdiction de
together
l'emploi d'armes chimiques.
reiterate
Le monde nous
our
regarde
rejection of the use of
et il regarde en
chemical weapons. The world
particulier
is watching
ceux
us.
qui,
In
en
particular,
protégeant un
it is
régime
watching those who,
indéfendable,
by
se rendraient
protecting an
complices de ces crimes les
indefensible
plus odieux.
regime, become
Je vous remercie.
in some ways indirectly participate in those crimes. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the representative from France, and now we'll give the floor to the representative from the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Madam President. On the 28th of February, I asked a simple question of this Security Council. Will we take action against those who use chemical weapons in Syria? We had a chance that day to pass a resolution doing exactly that. A resolution that would have taken action against the Assad regime and against Daesh, these horrific weapons, for violating international law. A clear signal that there was Security Council unity, global unity, against any use of these weapons. But after Russia and China vetoed, it seems that the only message sent to Assad was one of encouragement. And yesterday, we saw the consequences of those vetoes. Those consequences are painted on the stricken faces of the children of Khan Sheikhoun, killed potentially by a regime that will stop at nothing to hold on to power. And history will judge all of us for how we respond to these unforgettable and unforgivable images of the innocent, who had already suffered so much even before yesterday's attack. How long are we going to sit here and pretend that actions in this chamber have no consequences, that vetoes have no bearing on the lives of innocent men, women, and children? Russia has said that the opposition is responsible, that a regime airstrike struck an opposition depot for munitions. But we have seen nothing to suggest that any non-state actors in Syria have the sort of chemical weapons that would be consistent with the symptoms that we saw yesterday. Russia will say simply that we don't have enough information about the attack. And yet we have every indication that this was a sustained attack using aircraft over a number of hours. We see all the signs of an attack using a nerve agent capable of killing over 100 people and harming hundreds more. If that is not enough to demand action, what is? There's only one air force that has used such weapons in Syria. There's only one party to this conflict that the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons says has, and I quote, gaps, inconsistencies, and discrepancies, close quote, in its Chemical Weapons Convention declaration. Only one party that still refuses inspectors access to its facilities. This doesn't look like the work of terrorists. This doesn't look like the work of the opposition. This bears all the hallmarks of the Assad regime, and the use of chemical weapons is a war crime. Make no mistake, this regime seems intent on making a mockery of the Russian-backed ceasefire. Russia has blocked council action, claiming that we might undermine the Astana process. Yet the only thing undermining the Astana process is Assad, the very man they seek to protect. Russia deployed the full weight of its armed forces to help him. They reduced Aleppo to ruins and displaced hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children, all in the name of fighting terrorism. And what does Russia get as repayment? Assad humiliates Russia in the eyes of the world. by intensifying his attacks, by reducing the Istana ceasefire to rubble. Assad humiliates Russia by showing just how empty Syria's promise was to remove all its chemical weapons. If Russia is to restore its credibility, they will need to join us in condemning this attack and in urging the OPCW to investigate it as soon as possible. They will join us in calling for the fullest support and cooperation for the investigation team. They will help, not hinder, our efforts to strengthen accountability through the vital work of the Joint Investigative Mechanism. There can be no further delay in fully staffing the leadership of that mechanism. They must have the right technical and analytical capacity to take on the task ahead. If Russia fails to do so, if Russia falls back on its old ways, defending the indefensible, we will not be deterred. The United Kingdom, with our allies, will continue to seek justice for the victims of chemical weapons attacks in Syria and elsewhere. We will continue to pursue other avenues for action. European Union sanctions announced last month against Syrian military figures show that we can still take steps to hold individuals to account, that we can still show that use of chemical weapons brings consequences. But until Russia changes its ways, this Security Council will remain blocked. That is the sad reality that the world has got used to. They view us as a table of diplomats doing nothing, our hands tied behind our backs, beholden to Russian intransigence. But the world should be under no illusion. What Russia does in this chamber does not cause inaction. Defending the indefensible causes suffering. Each and every abuse of their veto has consequences. And for the people of Khan Sheikhoun, those consequences have been unspeakable. So let me close by asking Russia, what is your plan? What is your plan to stop these horrific, senseless attacks? We had a plan, and we had the support, and you rejected it to protect Assad. It's time now for you to stop blocking and start helping by joining Security Council consensus. Our draft resolution condemns this attack and calls for consequences. All 15 Security Council members should be able to condemn this and every use of chemical weapons. We expect your unanimous support. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you to the representative of the United Kingdom, and now we will give the floor to the representative of Bolivia.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam President.
El Consejo se reúne hoy ante una circunstancia terrible. El Estado Plurinacional de Bolivia expresa su firme condena al uso de armas químicas o el uso de elementos químicos como armas por ser un hecho injustificable y criminal, independientemente de su motivación, donde quiera que sea, cuando sea y por quien quiera que sea cometido. Los responsables de uso de armas químicas deben ser debidamente investigados, procesados y sancionados con el mayor rigor. El uso de armas químicas es una violación a las obligaciones establecidas por el derecho internacional y una amenaza a la paz y seguridad internacionales. Bolivia exige que se realice una investigación independiente, imparcial, completa y concluyente, que sea totalmente despolitizada. En tal sentido, reiteramos nuestro apoyo a la Organización para la Prohibición de las Armas Químicas, OPAC, y al mecanismo de investigación conjunta de Naciones Unidas para que, de acuerdo con sus mandatos, puedan cumplir con las tareas mencionadas anteriormente. Asimismo, expresamos nuestra enérgica condena a cualquier tipo de ataque contra civiles inocentes o infraestructura civil en este o en cualquier otro conflicto, y reiteramos la obligación de todas las partes de garantizar la seguridad e integridad de las personas que se ven atrapados en medio del conflicto. Reiteramos que el uso de armas químicas es un serio delito en contra de la seguridad internacional. Manifestamos además nuestras sentidas condolencias con las familias de las víctimas y con el pueblo sirio, alentando a continuar con los esfuerzos para encontrar una paz sostenible. achieve
Señora
sustainable
Presidenta,
peace. Madam
respecto al
President,
informe
with
emitido el
respect
22 de
to
marzo de
the
2017 por la
28th of
Secretaría de la
March,
Organización para la
report
Prohibición
from the
de las Armas
OPCW,
Químicas
22nd of
sobre el
March,
proceso de verificación de armas
report
químicas
on
en Siria,
the,
valoramos que se haya,
FFM
hablo
in
comillas,
Syria.
verificado
We
la destrucción de
appreciate that
24
they
de las
have,
27 instalaciones
verified
declaradas por
the
la República Árabe
destruction
Siria
of 24
en las
of
que
the
pudieran
27 facilities in
producir
Syria,
armas químicas,
which
cierro comillas.
could
Y esperamos que la
produce
situación de
chemical
seguridad en
weapons, and it
territorio
is our
sirio
hope that
mejore
the
y
security
permita la
situation on
verificación de
Syrian
las
territory will
restantes
improve and
instalaciones.
will allow for the verification of remaining
Resaltamos que de
facilities.
acuerdo al mismo
We
informe, abro
underscore that
comillas,
in
todos los
accordance with the
químicos
report,
declarados por
all
la República Árabe
declared
Siria
chemicals
que fueron
by the
removidos en su
Syrian Arab
territorio en
Republic that were
2014
removed in
han sido
2014
destruidos,
have been
cierro comillas,
destroyed.
por lo que destacamos la
Therefore, we
disposición y
highlight
voluntad
the
expresada
availability
por el
and
gobierno sirio
express will
para
of the
cumplir
Syrian
con sus
government to
obligaciones
fulfill its
internacionales.
international obligations.
Igualmente, saludamos que el
Likewise,
mecanismo
we
de
welcome the
investigación
fact that
conjunta
the joint
continúe
investigative
fortaleciendo su
mechanism
capacidad
will continue
operativa
to
al
build
reabrir su
its
oficina de
operative,
investigaciones en la sede de la OPAC
operational
y que el
capacity,
trabajo que realice
and
se desarrolle
that
de la
its
manera
work
más
is being
metódica,
carried out
técnica y
methodically
fidedigna posible.
and in a reliable
Señora
technical
Presidenta,
way. Madam
Bolivia
President,
llama a la
Bolivia
unidad
calls
del
for
Consejo de
the
Seguridad
unity of the Security Council
en sentido de que no se
in
utilice
the
esta
sense that
Cámara,
this
que no se
chamber
utilice
should
este
not be
Consejo
used
como una caja de
as
resonancia de la propaganda de
a
guerra.
way of
Que este sea
thwarting
un lugar al que
peaceful
la
purposes
comunidad
and as
internacional vea
a
con
sounding board
confianza
for
y
propaganda.
que
This should
no
be
sea
a
utilizado
trustworthy
como un
institution,
peón
and it
en
shouldn't
el
be
tablero de
used
la
as a
guerra.
pawn on the
Será la
chessboard of the
investigación
warlords.
la que determine
This
quiénes son los responsables.
is
Y creemos
the
que lo más
accountability will be determined by
responsable es no
investigation, and
adelantarnos a determinar
those
quiénes son
most
los responsables de
responsible.
este hecho, sino garantizar una
We must
investigación
ensure that we don't
independiente,
anticipate this
imparcial,
investigation, but
completa y
allow for
concluyente.
a conclusive,
Señora Presidenta, para
comprehensive,
finalizar,
independent and impartial
quiero resaltar
investigation.
las
In closing,
palabras del
Madam
secretario
President,
general,
I'd like to underscore
quien nos
the words
recuerda
of the
que en
Secretary
Siria
General, who reminds
se
us that in
produce,
Syria,
ya han pasado 7 años
7
de
years
esta guerra,
have already gone
con
by since this war broke out,
los sufrimientos en el pueblo
and
sirio que
this
se
has
van
led
profundizando.
to a deepening of
Y creemos que
the
también es
suffering
obligación de
of
este
the Syrian
Consejo,
people, and it is
ahora y en
incumbent
todo
on this
momento,
council
recordar
now and
cuáles
always
son las causas
to
de esa terrible
remember
guerra.
the underlying causes of
Probablemente
this
no
terrible
estaríamos
war.
aquí
We
sentados
probably would not be sitting here
lamentando los 7 años de guerra y
lamenting the
sufrimiento del
7
pueblo
years
sirio
of war and
sin la
suffering of
invasión
the Syrian
que
people
se ha
without the
producido
invasion that
en
took
contra
place
de
against
Irak hace más de
Iraq
10 años
over
o en
10
contra de
years
los
ago,
procesos
or against
intervencionistas
the
en el Medio
or because of the
Oriente. Yo creo que es
interventionist policies
responsabilidad
in
de
the
todos
Middle East.
que
It is incumbent on everyone
quienes han cometido esos
to
crímenes
ensure
también
that
asuman su
those responsible
responsabilidad
for these
histórica.
crimes also be
Creemos que es
brought
imprescindible
to
que se reconozca
justice
que la
for their
injerencia,
historic
el intervencionismo,
responsibilities as well. And
esa
therefore, this
política de cambio de
interventionist approach
régimen
and this
es la que niega
policy of
toda la
changing regime
civilización
is the one
construida
that is
por
a
los
denial
distintos
of
pueblos del
all
mundo.
civilizations
Lamentamos,
produced by,
por
built by all
supuesto,
countries of
y nos
the
sentimos
world.
dolidos y conmovidos
We are
por la pérdida de
moved
vidas,
at the
pero
loss of
llamamos
lives, but
nuevamente,
we
reitero,
also once
a la
again would
unidad
like to
de este
call
Consejo
for
y que
unity
esta
in this
Cámara
council
no sea
and to ensure
una
that
caja de
this
resonancia
chamber
de
is
la
not
propaganda de
used to
guerra,
spread
sino un lugar en el que
war propaganda
debatamos
or as an
y
echo chamber
coincidamos
for
en los
propaganda, but we
principios
must
fundamentales de la
agree on
Carta
the fundamental
de la Organización de
principles
Naciones
enshrined
Unidas.
in the
Muchas
United
gracias.
Nations Charter. Thank you.
I thank the representative from Bolivia, and now I will give the floor to the representative from China.
谢谢主席女士。
Thank you, Madam President.
中方对日前叙利亚境内
China
发
is
生疑似使用化学
profoundly
品作为
shocked
武器，
by the suspected
并造
use
成
of
大
chemicals
量
as
平民伤
weapons
亡事件，
that happened a few
深感
days
震
ago
惊，
in Syria, which have
强烈
resulted in
谴责
enormous
任何
civilian
针
casualties.
对
We
平民的
strongly
袭击行
condemn
为。
any attacks against
中方
civilians.
坚决反对
China
任
firmly
何国家
opposes the use of
任何组织
chemicals, the chemical
任何
weapons
人
rather, by any
在
country,
任何情况
any
下使
organization,
用
or
化学
any
武器，
person under
这是
any
我们的一贯立场，
circumstances. And this has been
是
our
不容曲
consistent
解的
position,
一贯立场。
a position that brooks no
叙利亚境内
distortion
已多次发
as it
生
is
使用
consistent.
化学品作
Within
为武
Syria,
器的事
there have
件。
been many instances
中
of
方
the
支
use of
持
chemicals as
进化无
weapons.
组织
China
和联合
supports
国有
the
关方面
OPCW
对
as well
西
as
境内
related
发生
UN
的
entities
所有
in carrying out
我强调
comprehensive
所有 使用化学品作为武
objective
器
and
事
fair
件，进行
investigations
全面、
into
客观、
all, and I
公正调
repeat,
查，
all uses of
基于
chemicals
确凿
as
证据，
weapons, so as to,
得出
on the
经得
basis of
起
substantiated
历史
evidence,
和事实
conclusions
检验的结
that
论。
can stand the test of
对
time
使用化
and
学武器
facts.
的相关肇
It is
事者
essential to hold to
和责任
account
方要
all the
绳之以
related
法。
perpetrators and
叙利
responsible
亚冲突
parties
已
in
经进入
cases
第
of
7年，
chemical weapons.
已
The
经
Syrian
造成
conflict has
大
entered
量
its
无
7th
辜
year,
平民伤亡。
already resulting in
中方
enormous
对
civilian
叙利亚人
casualties.
民遭受
China
的
is
苦难
empathetic
感同
with the
身受，
Syrian people for their
呼吁
sufferings,
叙利亚
and
各
we
方
call upon the
尽
various
早结束
Syrian
冲突。
parties to put an early
政治
end
解
to
决
the conflict.
是叙利亚问
Political
题的
settlement
唯
is
一出
the
路。
only way out of
我
the
们希
Syrian
望
question.
所有
It
各
is hope
方
of China
为
that
政治解
all the
决
parties
创造条件，
will create
而
conditions
不是
for
制造
political
困难。
settlement rather than creating trouble or difficulties.
中方希望
It is hope
国
of
际社
China
会
that the
抓住
international
叙利亚问
community
题
will
政治解
capitalize
决的
on
难得
the
契机，
rare opportunities
坚持
offered by
政
the
治解
political
决的大方
settlement,
向，
persist in the
加
general
大
direction
支持联
of
合国的
political settlement,
斡旋
step
主
up
渠
its
道作
support
用，
to the UN as the main
支
channel
持
for mediation,
德米斯图拉
support
特使的
the
工
work
作，
of Special Envoy de
敦促
Mistura,
叙利亚
urge
各
the
方
various Syrian
巩
parties
固停
to
火，
consolidate
积累
ceasefire
互信，
and build up mutual
在日内瓦
confidence,
和谈中
mutual trust.
坚持叙人主导，
Stick to the
叙人所有的原
Syrian-led
则，
and Syrian-owned
推
principle
动
in the
叙利
Geneva
亚政治
talks
解决进
and
程，
push for
取得
positive
积极成果。
results to be achieved in the
反恐
political settlement
是叙
process.
利亚面临的重大
Counterterrorism
紧迫问
is the
题，
major urgent
国际社
topic
会
facing the
应加
Syrian
强
question.
协调，
The international committee
统一标
strengthen
准，
its coordination,
坚决打
unified
击所有
standards, and
被安理会列
resolutely
明的
fight
恐怖
against
组织。
all the terrorist organizations
最后，我
enlisted
希望
by
再
the
次指
Council.
出，
Lastly, I wish to point out once
英国代
again
表在
the
安理
UK
会这个
delegate
庄严的场所
on
公然
this
歪曲
august
别国的
forum
严正
of
立
the
场
Council
是不能容忍的。
is openly
英国
distorting
代表
the
的逻
position of
辑
China
完
is
全
not
站不
to
住
be
脚。
tolerated. The position of the
我希
UK
望英
does
国代
not
表能够
hold
停
water.
止
It is my hope that
在
the UK
化学武
delegate
器这个具有国际共
on
识
the
的问题
question
上
that
滥
enjoys
用安理
international
会，
consensus
达到它
that
政
is
治目的的
chemical
做法，
weapons. It will stop
这
the
不是
abusing the
符合叙利亚人民利
Secret
益的
Council.
做法。
Doing
我
so
希望
will
今
not
后
be
英国
in
代
the
表不再这
interest
样
of
做。
Syrian people.
谢谢主席。
I will hope that this UK delegate will refrain from such practice in the future. Thank you.
All right. Thank you to the representative from China. And now I'll give the floor to the representative from Japan.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank the U.S. Presidency for convening this meeting. I also thank USG Kim Won-soo for his briefing. Japan is seriously concerned by continued reports of the alleged use of chemical weapons in Syria, including the most recently in Idlib, which reportedly led to the tragedy with more than 400 victims. The use of chemical weapons is not permissible and must be strongly condemned under any circumstances. And those who are responsible for the use must be identified and held accountable. I believe there is unity inside the Council on these fundamental points. In addressing the new allegations in Syria, you must first determine whether chemical weapons were actually used, and second, if confirmed, we must identify those who are responsible. Taking measures to hold the perpetrators is the final and indispensable step in fulfilling the Council's responsibility. Impunity is unacceptable. In this context, Japan welcomes the fact that the OPCW fact-finding mission has already begun gathering information. We urge the Syrian government and all parties in Syria to cooperate fully with the FFM and the FMM to conclude its investigations, not only on the Idlib incident, but also on other recent allegations as soon as possible, so that the OPCW-UN Joint Investigative Mechanism can conduct its own investigation in order to identify those who are responsible. With this in mind, it is increasingly important to further improve coordination between these two mechanisms and the Council to react more swiftly to the alleged use of chemical weapons. In order to dissuade potential actors from using chemical weapons, it is crucial to show that any use of chemical weapons will be brought to light and held accountable. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you to the representative from Japan, and now I'll give the floor to the representative from Italy.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, allow me first of all to thank the High Representative Kim Won-soo for his briefing, and I would like to express our appreciation for your leadership in navigating this year's difficult and crucial issues for international security architecture. Madam President, Italy is shocked by the alleged renewed chemical weapons attack perpetrated in Syria and by additional bombardments on hospitals where the wounded were being treated. What happened in Khan Sekun is sickening and despicable. We condemn it in the strongest terms, just like we condemn the use of chemical weapons by anyone, anywhere, and under any circumstances. Carrying out such attacks not only confirms an utter contempt of the Syrian regime for its own population, it's also a tragic reminder that international law, including these Council resolutions, as well as the international non-proliferation architecture, continue to be blatantly violated. We welcome the commitment by the OPCW fact-finding mission to gather information from all available sources, and we look forward to its findings. In this framework, we support the draft resolution tabled by the UK, the United States and France, aimed at condemning the attack and ensuring the investigations are as effective as possible. Madam President, as long as nobody is held accountable for these war crimes and crimes against humanity, the incentive will remain to continue carrying them out. This is why fighting impunity, identifying the perpetrators and holding them accountable must be a shared priority for this Council, one that unifies us, not one that divides us. Italy had encouraged action by this Council to ensure accountability and sanctions against those responsible, following up on the joint investigative mechanism activities. After the pathway in the Security Council was blocked, Italy has backed, on March 20, new restrictive measures by the European Union against 4 high-ranking Syrian military officials for their role in the use of chemical weapons against the civilian population. Italy also supports the mechanism set up by the General Assembly to gather evidence and assist future prosecutions of crimes committed in Syria. Moreover, as subscribers of the Code of Conduct regarding Security Council action against genocide, crimes against humanity or war crimes, and of the French-Mexican initiative on veto restraints in case of mass atrocities, we reiterate again the call for this Council to act. These crimes should also, in our view, warrant the attention of the International Criminal Court. Indiscriminate violence against civilians continues to be considered a tool to win this war militarily. Such an approach is not only morally unacceptable, it's also both wrong and delusional. A solution will never be found through military means, however appealing that might seem to one of the parties right now. The only way out of the crisis is through an inclusive political solution in accordance with Security Council Resolution 2254 that addresses the plight and the aspiration of the Syrian people and drains the quagmire of violence and instability where terrorism flourishes and endangers the world. It is to be underlined, furthermore, that the attacks have been cynically perpetrated at the end of a round of talks in Geneva that tried, under the leadership of UN Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura, whom we support, to inject new life into the political process, and they cast serious new doubts, these attacks, on the commitment to a political solution. Madam President, these attacks also cast new doubts on the regime's willingness to abide by the terms of the ceasefire. They do not represent an isolated case. They are only one of the repeated violations of the ceasefire that have been carried out, particularly by the regime, over the past few months. This behavior destroys any confidence between the parties on the ground, just like the deliberate restrictions in the provision of aid that continue to worsen an already tragic humanitarian situation. A strengthened cessation of hostilities is our best hope to move away from the military phase and to ensure safe and complete humanitarian access. In this respect, and concluding, we all have, and particularly the co-guarantors of the Astana process, a special responsibility to live up to our commitments and ensure the full implementation of the ceasefire as a basis for a concrete political process. I thank you, Madam President.
Thank you to the representative from Italy, and now we will turn the floor over to the representative from Egypt.
السيد الرئيس،
Madam
لا
President,
يسعني اليوم إلا أن أبدأ
I would like
بتأكيد
to
إدانة
start
مصر
by
الشديدة
expressing Egypt's
لاستخدام
strong
السلاح
condemnation
الكيميائي
of the
وأسلحة
use of
الدمار
chemical
الشامل
weapons and
من قبل
weapons
أي
of mass
طرف
destruction
أيا
by
كان،
any party.
وإدانتنا بصفة
We
خاصة
express
لما
our
تم
condemnation in
إثباته من
particular
استخدام هذا
of
السلاح
the
ضد
confirmed
أشقائنا
use of
السوريين
chemical weapons
المدنيين في
against
أكثر من
our
حادثة
brothers, the
في
Syrian
سوريا،
people, in more than one
وفقا
incident in
لتقارير
Syria,
لجنة التحقيق
according
المشتركة
to the reports of the
المعنية
joint
بالتحقيق
investigative
في تلك
mechanism
الحوادث.
responsible for investigating such incidents.
كما أؤكد أن يصعب علينا تصور أن تمر تلك
We
الجرائم
cannot
مرور الكرام
understand how such
بدون
crimes can go
محاسبة
unnoticed
دقيقة
without any
وعادلة،
thorough and fair
ومن ثم فإن
accountability.
مصر
Therefore,
ساندت وستساند
Egypt has
مفهوم
always
المحاسبة
supported the need
لكل من
to
ثبت
hold
ضلوعه
accountable
في تلك
any
الأفعال
party
غير الإنسانية
responsible for these
أيا كانت
inhuman acts,
الأسباب وراءها،
regardless of justification,
بما في ذلك من خلال مجلس
including
الأمن
through the
وعلى
Security
أساس
Council
التقاليد
and
والقواعد
based on
المتوافق
the
عليها
agreed rules and
والتي
principles
تحرص على تقصي الحقائق والأدلة.
and an effective
ودعوني هنا أن أعرب
evidence
عن
gathering
أسفنا
and
الشديد في هذا
investigation. In this
الصدد
regard, I would like to
إزاء
express
الانقسام
my
الذي
regret
شهده المجلس
regarding
مؤخرا
the division
وفشله
within
في
the
الخروج
Council and
بقرار
its failure to
يؤسس
reach
لمفهوم
a
المحاسبة
resolution that
بعيدا
would ensure
عن التسييس
accountability
وحالة
away
الاستقطاب
from the
التي
politicization
تنتاب الأطراف الدولية.
and the polarization that has characterized the
هذا
international
وفيما يتعلق
arena.
بالتقارير بشأن الأحداث المؤسفة التي
As
شهدتها
for
مدينة
the
خان
recent
شيخون
reports on the
بإدلب
unfortunate
أمس،
incidents in Khan Sheikhoun,
فإنني أدعو
Idlib
جميع
yesterday,
الأطراف
I
للتعاون
call on all
الوثيق مع
parties
بعثة
to
تقصي
cooperate
الحقائق
closely with
التابعة
the
لمنظمة حظر الأسلحة
fact-finding mission
الكيميائية
of the OPCW
للوقوف على حقيقة تلك الأحداث
to determine the
وأدعو
facts
البعثة
on the ground. I
بالخروج
call
في
on
أسرع
the
وقت
mission
ممكن
to reach its
باستخلاصاتها في هذا
conclusions
الشأن
expeditiously
لتمكين لجنة
to
التحقيق
allow the
المشتركة
joint investigative
من
mechanism
ممارسة نشاطها
to carry
وفقا
out its
لقرارات مجلس
activities
الأمن.
according to Security Council resolutions.
لذلك فإننا سنؤيد وندعم أي تحرك جاد في
Therefore,
المجلس
we would support
للتعاطي
any
مع هذا
serious
الحدث
action
وغيره
within the Council
ومحاسبة
to address
مرتكبيه.
this and other incidents and to
وعلى
hold
صعيد
people
آخر
and
أود
parties
تكرار
responsible.
دعوتنا لإيلاء
In this
الاهتمام
regard,
اللازم
we
لمسألة
stress the
تصنيع أو
need
امتلاك
to
أو
focus
استخدام
on the issue
الفاعلين من غير
of the
الدول
production,
لأسلحة
possession,
الدمار
and use
الشامل،
by any non-state actors of weapons of mass
والتعاطي
destruction,
مع هذا الخطر
and the need
الذي
to
يحيط
address
بالمنطقة
this
والعالم،
issue which
لا
constitutes a
سيما
threat to
وأن
the
مجلس
region
الأمن
and to the
ما زال
world,
يفتقر
especially
للأدوات
that the
القانونية
Security Council
اللازمة
lacks
للردع
the necessary
والتعامل الفوري
legal instruments
مع هذا
to deter
التهديد.
and address these threats.
السيد الرئيس، إن استهداف
Madam
وقتل
President,
المدنيين أصبح واقعا
The
أليما
killing and
وجزءا من الحياة
targeting of
اليومية
civilians has
للشعب
become a
السوري
painful
الشقيق،
reality and a part of the daily life
بل
of the
تحول
Syrian
الموت
people.
والتشريد في سوريا
It has become
لمجرد
the
أعداد
norm that
تستغل
death and
من هنا
displacement in Syria
وهناك
are
لأسباب
spoken of in
سياسية،
terms of figures and numbers to be used and exploited for
حتى
purely
تعاود
political
البعض ذلك
purposes.
وللأسف الشديد، فإنه بعد أن توصل هذا المجلس
Unfortunately,
لتوافق حول محددات
After the
العملية
Council had been
السياسية
able to
وسبل
agree on the
التعامل مع
parameters of a
مخاطر
political
السلاح
process
الكيميائي
to address
وأسلوب
the threat
السير
of
عملية
chemical
النفاذ
weapons
الإنساني،
and to ensure humanitarian access in
فإن أجواء
Syria,
الانقسام والتناحر
division
والذي
and
قد لا تتعلق
infighting
بسوريا
within the
أحيانا
Council, even on
قد تعود
issues
مرة
not related
أخرى
to Syria,
لتهدد أفق
have appeared once
التسوية.
again to threaten the prospects of settlement.
ومن ثم وبالتوازي مع ضرورة قيام الأجهزة الدولية
I stress
المعنية
once again the
بالتحقيق
need
فيما
for
يرتكب من
international
جرائم الحرب
mechanisms
في
to
سوريا
investigate
وتفعيل مفهوم
all war
المحاسبة
crimes committed
من
in
خلال
Syria to ensure
مقترب
accountability
جاد
through a
ونزيه.
serious and honest approach.
فإنني أدعو أعضاء
And I
المجلس
call
لسعادة
on
الحوار
the
السياسي
members of the
الجاد
Council
لمواجهة
to go
الأزمة
back
السورية
to a serious political
وأدعوهم
dialogue to
لتلافي
address
العودة
the Syrian
لأجواء
crisis
التنافس
while avoiding
والاستقطاب
the atmosphere
والتراشق
of
الدعائي
competition
التي شهدتها
polarization,
السنوات
and
الماضية
media mutual
والتي لم
blaming,
يدفع
which
فاتورتها
have
سوى
characterized
ملايين
the
من
recent
الأبرياء
years.
في سوريا
It is worth
ودول
noting
المنطقة
that
التي
millions of
ستعاني
innocent
من
civilians in
العواقب
Syria
الوخيمة
are the ones to
لهذا
pay the
الصراع
price, and the
لسنوات
people of the
مقبلة.
region will bear
وشكرا
the
سيد
brunt
الرئيس.
of this crisis for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you to the representative of Egypt, and now I will give the floor to the representative of Uruguay.
Gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you, Madam President.
Viendo durante el día de ayer las
Yesterday,
imágenes
as I
provenientes de
saw
Khan
the
Sheikhoun,
images coming from
nos vinieron
Han Sheikhoun,
en realidad al estómago,
I really
pero
felt something
luego
in
también a
my
la cabeza.
stomach and then, of course, in my head.
Las palabras que usó
And I
Joseph
recall
Conrad
the words that
en
Joseph
su
Conrad
novela
used
The Heart of Darkness,
in his novel, The Heart of
y que
Darkness,
luego las retomara Francis Ford Coppola
and
para
that Francis Ford
usar en su
Coppola
película
used
Apocalypse Now,
that quote in
y en la
Apocalypse Now.
boca de Marlon Brando volverlas a repetir.
And in
En
the
inglés.
in the words of Marlon Brando,
horror.
the horror,
The horror.
the horror.
Eso es lo que uno
That is
percibe
what
y siente
one
ante estas
perceives and
bestialidades.
feels in the face of these
Estos no son actos de guerra, estos
these
son actos
horrors.
barbáricos.
These are not acts of war.
El
These,
Uruguay
these are barbaric
condena
actions.
en los más enérgicos términos
Uruguay condemns
el
in
ataque
the
del día de ayer,
strongest terms
con un enorme
yesterday's
saldo de
attack,
víctimas, incluyendo mujeres y
with
niños,
a huge
niños que
resulting in
veíamos,
huge loss of life, including many
muriendo
children.
tratando de respirar,
Children that we saw dying, trying to as they
mujeres
tried
ya
to
muertas
breathe.
abrazadas a sus hijos.
Women dead,
Otra vez
clutching
más,
their
porque
children.
lamentablemente
And we've seen
estas
this once
imágenes
again because unfortunately
Siria
these images
son
in
repetidas.
Syria have become
El hecho que se haya utilizado gasarín
been
u
repeated
otro agente
regularly.
nervioso indica
and the fact
que los
that
responsables
sarin or
tenían
some
el
other
propósito de causar el mayor daño posible
or some other
a los
chemical
residentes
agent
de la
was
zona.
used, it clearly means that the
Quienes
culprits
mueren
meant to
asfixiados
cause
de forma espantosa según
as many
las imágenes que todos vimos.
victims as possible. And those
Y una vez
we all
más,
saw the
en una
images of
nueva
victims
muestra
choking.
de nulo sentido de humanidad
This is once again
de
further
quienes combaten en
display
Siria.
that
El hospital donde estaban siendo
those
tratados
who were
las
fighting in
víctimas
Syria
fue bombardeado minutos
often
después.
show no humanity
Un
because the hospital
modelo que
which
se
was treating the
repite ya no
wounded
solo en
was
Siria,
bombed
en
just a
Yemen,
few minutes later after the initial attack. And this is
Primero
something we're
atacar a
seeing
los
repeated
civiles,
in
minutos
Syria,
más
in
tarde
Yemen, and
atacar
others.
a
So
todos
first you
aquellos
attack
quienes
civilians,
asisten
then
a las
you
víctimas.
just a few minutes later you attack all those who are trying to
Como
aid the
dijo
victims.
acertadamente ayer el
And
secretario general,
as the Secretary
señor
General,
Guterres,
Mr. Guterres,
nadie
so
está
aptly
ganando esta guerra,
put it
todos
yesterday,
la
no
estamos
one is
perdiendo.
winning
Y en
this war.
particular,
Everyone is
los
losing it.
millones de sirios
And in particular,
que
the
siguen
millions
viendo
of
sus vidas
Syrians
destrozadas a
who
diario.
continue seeing their lives destroyed
Estos
on a daily
aberrantes
basis.
crímenes no
These
pueden ni deben
horrific
quedar
crimes
impunes,
should not
sean
and cannot
quienes sean
remain
los responsables.
unpunished. Whoever
No
is
contamos al
responsible
momento
for
con
them.
los elementos de juicio
We
suficientes que
don't
nos
have,
permitan
for the
afirmar
time being, enough
categóricamente
information
dónde
that
recae en esta
allow us to
oportunidad la
categorically
responsabilidad.
affirm who's
Sin embargo,
responsible for this
debemos
action.
recordar
However, we need to recall
que corresponde
that
al gobierno sirio
it is
la responsabilidad primaria
the
de
primary
proteger a su
responsibility of
población.
the Syrian government to
Y
protect its
también
population.
es el gobierno sirio
And it's also
el
the Syrian
responsable
government
primario
that has
para
the main
brindar el máximo
responsibility
e irrestricto acceso
to
a la misión de expertos que la OPAC envió en el día de ayer a Siria para investigar las
access to
circunstancias de este
OPCW
ataque y
experts who
recabar
arrived in Syria
pruebas.
yesterday to
Confiamos en que, a
investigate the attack
diferencia de
and to collect
anteriores
evidence.
instancias,
We
la investigación
hope
se realice de
that-
manera expedita
that unlike
para
previous
conocer quién
cases,
está
this
detrás de
inquiry is
estos
carried out
hechos
in an
y exigir de
expeditious
esta
way to
manera que
understand
rindan
who is
cuentas
responsible for
por
these
sus
actions and to make sure that they are held
Este
accountable. for
episodio
those
no
actions.
es aislado,
This
sino que se suma
episode is
a la
not an
intensificación de
isolated
combates y
episode,
bombardeos
but
de las
is
últimas
to be
semanas,
added to the intensification of
pese al
bombing
cese el fuego que
and
debería estar
fighting over the
vigente
past
y a
days
los
and weeks,
recientes
in spite of
atentados
the truce that
terroristas
is
que
supposed to
causaron
be
también
in
decenas
effect,
de muertos.
and is to
Todo
be
esto
added
pone
to
en
the
riesgo los renovados
tens of
intentos
terrorist
del enviado
attacks that have
especial
caused many
Staffan de
deaths
Mistura para acercar a las partes en pos de un acuerdo político intrasirio
the efforts of
que
Staffan de
permita
Mistura, who has been
poner
trying to
fin a este
bring the
conflicto.
parties together to reach a political
Lamentablemente el
solution
Consejo de
and put an
Seguridad,
end to
señora
this
Presidente, sigue
conflict.
siendo parte del
Unfortunately, Madam
problema
President,
y
the
no de la
Security Council
solución.
continues to
El
be
tiempo
part
es
of the
escaso y
problem
cada
and
día que
not
pasa
part of the
se sigue
solution.
incrementando el número de muertos y
Time
heridos
is
en
counted
la
and
destrucción de todo el país.
every day we
De
see
poco o
more and
nada
more
servirá el
people
dinero
killed and
recaudado
more and
en
more of the
conferencias de
country
donantes
destroyed.
si la
I mean,
destrucción en
the
Siria y
money
en otros
collected
países no tiene fin.
during the donors
En todo caso podrán
pledging conference
reconstruirse las
will be
infraestructuras
useless if the
físicas,
country is
pero
destroyed.
nunca las vidas de
It
miles
certainly might be
de
possible to
civiles
rebuild
inocentes.
the physical
La
infrastructure, but it will
exigencia
not
de
be
un cese
possible to
completo
return
de
the
bombardeos y
hundreds of thousands
hostilidades
of lost lives.
vuelve a tener plena vigencia. Gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you to the representative of Uruguay, and now we'll give the floor to the representative of Kazakhstan.
Thank you, Madam President. Kazakhstan's positions on the use of chemical weapons in Syria is consistent and well known. We strongly oppose any use of chemical weapons, as well as any other kind of WMD by any state, organization, or individual, whatever be the circumstances. We were shocked and deeply saddened by this terrible chemical attack in Idlib, Syria. Kazakhstan strongly condemns such actions, which demonstrate irresponsibility and the ruthless intent to destabilize the situation in the country. Taking this opportunity, we express our heartfelt condolences to the bereaved families of the victims and wish speedy recovery to those injured. All our collective efforts to prevent further escalation of the situation in Syria, including the continued peace negotiations in Astana and Geneva, are facing the risk of being undermined by such provocative actions. Any criminal behavior which is implemented in such inhuman ways and pursues intimidation must be classified as a terrorist action, which we must combat with full determination. Kazakhstan urges the OPCW and the United Nations to immediately conduct full investigations without any delay and identify the perpetrators of such a heinous crime. As we see, it is mainly the innocent people who continue to suffer, and the deliberate use by criminals to sow fear and anxiety is a characteristic method of terrorist organizations. In light of this, we request a full and prompt investigation which must proceed beyond routine and procedural formalities. The OPCW fact-finding mission must directly collect evidence and make every effort to identify the perpetrators of this flagrant crime in order to bring them to justice. Madam President, given the circumstances and proceeding from the need for full and unbiased disclosure of these crimes, we need full and open cooperation between the JIM and FFM. As a proponent of impartial and full disclosure of all chemical crimes in Syria, Kazakhstan urges the government of Syrian Arab Republic, as well as other parties, to cooperate fully with the international inspectors of the UN and the OPCW. Any delay in the disclosure and holding the perpetrators accountable will demonstrate a tacit agreement to continue with similar flagrant crimes in the future. Madam President, I thank UN High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, Mr. Kim Won-soo, for his report. Yesterday's flagrant crimes in the Idlib region of Syria, as well as ongoing potential threat of the use of chemical weapons in this country, demand serious and energetic efforts. As we see from the report, the critical issues that require progress to move us forward unfortunately remain unchanged. First of all, it concerns the 3 remaining facilities, the destruction of which still seems impossible due to the lack of necessary security conditions. It is necessary to take urgent actions to finally resolve this problem. In turn, it will help us to ensure that all official sources that raise suspicions about the storage of hazardous chemicals there would no longer exist. Therefore, more active interaction is needed with the government of Syria. In this regard, we look forward to the resumption of high-level consultations with Damascus in May 2017 to address all unresolved issues related to the Syrian Arab Republic's declaration. We expect the results of these consultations in the next report, which will outline the forthcoming steps that need to be taken. Secondly, we would like to see more dynamic and speedy measures taken by the fact-finding mission which could help JIM to commence investigations on new crimes. Thirdly, the active interaction and collaboration of the JIM with the three committees of the UN Security Council, in accordance with paragraph 4 of Resolution 2319, would result in a more effective response to prevent and combat such threats. Bearing in mind that the mandate of the JIM is coming to an end already in November this year, we must urgently take all measures to strengthen the work. This is necessary for it to complete in a timely manner all the investigations of pending previous crimes as well as new ones committed in Syria. I thank you.
Thank you to the representative of Kazakhstan, and now I will give the floor to the representative of Sweden.
Thank you very much, Madam President, for calling this meeting with the urgency that the situation requires. I hope that the Council will shoulder its responsibility and act in a firm and united way in response to what we have seen. Madam President, we join other members of the Council in condemning the monstrous and cowardly attacks reported to have been carried out with chemical weapons yesterday on the people of Idlib. The pictures emerging are truly shocking. We've seen the lifeless bodies of those struck down as they went about their daily lives and the heartbreaking images of children desperately gasping for air. Our thoughts are with the family and friends of those who died and who have been injured, but there's also a sense of outrage. The attacks on the hospitals that followed are equally appalling. The use of chemical weapons is illegal and constitutes a threat to international peace and security, and can amount to crimes or war crimes or crimes against humanity. What happened in Idlib must now be investigated without delay. If the allegations are proven to be correct, then this will be a gruesome addition to the already confirmed cases of the use of chemical weapons and other serious international crimes committed by the Syrian regime. Those responsible for the use of chemical weapons in Syria must be held accountable, as this Council agreed in Resolution 2209. Madam President, in light of what we have seen over the last 24 hours, it is important that the Council now shows a united front. We must do all that is necessary to facilitate the important work of the OPCW and the Joint Investigative Mechanism, JIM. Therefore, Sweden fully supports the draft resolution put forward this morning by United Kingdom, France, and the United States. There is an urgent need for an OPCW fact-finding mission to establish the facts and to report its findings as soon as possible, including to identify those responsible. In order to do so successfully, they must receive the full cooperation of the Syrian authorities. Madam President, this attack further underlines the importance of the Council's continued focus on chemical weapons use in Syria. As we've stated before, the Syrian authorities must cooperate fully with the OPCW to allow them to verify the accuracy and completeness of the chemical weapons declarations. This is critical to addressing the gaps, inconsistencies, and discrepancies that remain. We appreciate the work of JIM, and we welcome that it will soon be fully operational. We look forward to reports containing more information regarding the 4 previously identified cases involving Daesh and the Syrian regime, as well as on new cases, including this most recent attack, to be presented by the OPCW fact-finding mission. Madam President, to conclude, we will continue our efforts in the Council and elsewhere to ensure that those responsible for the heinous crimes in Syria are held accountable. Sweden has contributed to the JIM, as well as to the impartial and independent mechanism mandated by the General Assembly and which is now being set up. The work of the Commission of Inquiry for Syria must also continue. We have also actively supported the European Union's recent introduction of targeted sanctions on individuals implicated in the use of chemical weapons in Syria. Madam President, the attack in Idlib underlines the importance of this Council's work to end the use of chemical weapons. We cannot shy away from our responsibilities. We must now redouble our efforts. I thank you very much.
Thank you to the representative of Sweden, and now we will give the floor to the representative of Ethiopia.
Thank you, Madam President. I wish to thank Mr. Kim Wan-soo for his briefing. Let me take this opportunity to express my appreciation to him for his commitment and dedicated service as Under-Secretary General and High Representative for Disarmament Affairs since June 2015. and also congratulate his successor, Ms. Izumi Nakamisu. Madam President, the report of the use of chemical weapons in Idlib yesterday is indeed very shocking. What we have seen on videos and pictures is simply heartbreaking. And Uruguay has earlier expressed so eloquently what we also felt about the gruesome sight. We express our profound sympathy for the victims of the attack. As we have stated before, we are concerned about continued report of the use of chemical weapons in Syria, including the 8 incidents that have been recorded since the beginning of the year. We strongly condemn any use of chemical weapons by any state or non-state actor. Use of chemicals as weapons is unacceptable regardless and unjustifiable. We agree with what the Secretary General stated in his letter dated 27 February 2017, and I quote, "The continuing use of toxic chemicals as weapons, as well as the use of chemical weapons in the Syrian Arab Republic, imperils the long-established norm against such weapons. Their use is intolerable, and impunity must be stopped by identifying and holding those responsible to account." End of quotation. We hope the reported attack in Idlib would be investigated by the OPCW fact-finding mission as effectively as possible. In this regard, we welcome the statement of the OPCW that indicated the fact-finding mission is in the process of gathering and analyzing information from all available sources. More importantly, after a proper investigation process, its perpetrators should be identified by the joint investigative mechanism based on reliable evidence to ensure accountability. It's very critical, Madam President, that whatever action is taken by the Council is and is seen to be based on credible evidence that no well-meaning and objectively disposed would have doubts about. Madam President, the continued reports of chemical attacks in Syria gives us additional justification to fully support the work of the joint investigative mechanism. That's why it is so critical that the JIM resumes its work as expeditiously as possible. Without its full operationalization, this Council would be unable to ensure accountability, which we believe is imperative to hold perpetrators to account and deter further use of chemical weapons. Therefore, it is essential to provide all the necessary support to JIM so that it could resume and conduct its investigation in a professional, independent, and impartial manner. This is not only a matter of ensuring justice to the victims of chemical weapons attack in Syria. It's also about preserving the non-proliferation architecture that is a critical pillar for maintaining global peace and security. The proliferation of chemical weapons and their use, including by terrorists, is a source of grave concern that poses a serious threat to peace and stability in the region and beyond. Such a threat could be sustainably addressed if political and diplomatic solutions are given primacy. It is only an inclusive political process that could ultimately address the Syrian crisis and stop the horrible attacks, including what we have seen yesterday. that continues to cause unspeakable sufferings to the people of Syria. Without underestimating the challenge that lie ahead, we note the limited progress made in the fifth intra-Syrian talks, which was concluded a few days ago. And we look forward to the briefing by Special Envoy Staffan de Mistura next week. In conclusion, we are inclined, Madam President, to look at the draft resolution proposed by UK, US, and France favorably. And it is our conviction that the more united the Council is with respect to actions that it takes on this matter, the more the international community would find it easier to control the menace of the use of chemical weapons. That is why we look forward to finding a common ground to ensure unity within the Council so that investigations are done as speedily and effectively as possible. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you to the representative of Ethiopia, and now we'll give the floor to the representative of Ukraine.
Thank you very much, Madam President. First of all, I wish to thank the United Kingdom and France for requesting today's meeting and the Presidency for promptly convening it. At the outset, let me recall the statement of the Foreign Minister of Ukraine issued today on the alleged use of chemical weapons in Syria, which reiterates, inter alia, that the use of chemical weapons by anyone, anywhere, and under any circumstances is a blatant violation of international law and must be strongly condemned, and those responsible for such acts must be held accountable. Madam President, there appears to be no end to incessant flow of reports from Syria regarding the use of toxic chemicals as weapons. A real Pandora's box was opened in 2012, and up to now, we continue witnessing grave consequences of Syrian government's actions and decisions, or rather lack of them, from 5 years ago. The genie is out of the bottle, but the international community is still undecided what to do about it, despite a consensus that chemical weapons use is unjustifiable and cannot be tolerated. The international community, including this Council, has been very prolific and eloquent in expressing concern and condemning the use of toxic chemicals as weapons. But that's about it. There is an astounding lack of concrete actions, and thus the gap between talking the talk and walking the walk is only growing. Vivid images of victims who got exposed to the poisonous gas in Idlib yesterday serve as a loud and clear wake-up call for the whole international community. They are a stark reminder to all of us in this chamber that there is a price to be paid for any failure to act. Those innocent civilians in Idlib paid an ultimate price because this Council could not get its act together on the Syrian chemical weapons file. Those children whose pictures we saw yesterday fight for breath and battle suffocation because of fateful decisions made in distant capitals by people preoccupied by their own grand agendas. Under the circumstances, repeating the usual mantra of OPCW investigation, GIM involvement, need for the host government's full cooperation, etc., sounds hollow, and frankly, it is an affront to the people of Syria. Moreover, Council failure to act on this issue will create false perception that perpetrators of this crime may hide behind the wall of lies and falsifications. The hybrid wall constructed by the Assad regime and secured by the Russian veto. This wall must be knocked down. Today, my only question is, where is the limit to our collective tolerance that appears to have no boundaries? And as a follow-up, how many more Idlibs will it take to finally move this issue? Madam President, proceeding from the Council's consolidated position that the use of chemical weapons is a flagrant violation of the international law, we believe it should act resolutely and without any delay. In this regard, Ukraine supports the draft resolution presented by the United States, the United Kingdom, and France, as a balanced and focused document which introduces specific actions. We hope this important document will be adopted by the Council today. This is the least we can do to ensure that the Idlib attack is not ignored. I thank you, Madam President.
Thank you to the representative of Ukraine, and now I will give the floor to the representative of Senegal.
Madame la Présidente,
Madam President,
à son tour, ma délégation
my
voudrait saluer
delegation
l'initiative de
would
la
also
France et
like
du
to
Royaume-Uni
welcome the initiative of France and the United
de
Kingdom
convoquer cette réunion d'urgence et
to
votre
convene
acceptation,
this
Madame
emergency
la
meeting
Présidente,
and
de
your
l'organiser
acceptance,
si
Madam
vite
President, to organize it so
pour permettre
swiftly
à notre Conseil de se pencher
and enable the
sur
Council
l'utilisation
to
présumée
look into the
de
alleged
substances
use
nocives
of harmful
d'agents chimiques,
substances
agrochimiques, je pose la question,
and chemical weapons. There's a
intervenu
question
hier,
sign over
4
that,
avril,
which took
qui
place
se trouve
yesterday,
être, Madame la Présidente, la fête nationale de mon
which
pays.
actually was the national day of my
À
country.
Khan Sheikhoum, dans le
In
gouvernorat
Khan
d'Idlib.
Sheikhoum,
Des
in
dizaines de morts et des
the
centaines de
province
personnes
governorate
asphyxiées,
of Idlib.
parmi
There were
lesquelles
scores
des
of
enfants,
dead and people
toutes
who
les
died
populations civiles.
asphyxiated,
Aux
including
familles des
children.
victimes et aux
The
peuples
entire civilian
civils frères,
population was
nous
affected.
adressons nos sincères
We would like
condoléances
to
et formons des
convey
vœux de
our
prompt
sincere
rétablissement
condolences
aux
to the
blessés.
families of the victims and
Je voudrais
our
exprimer mes
wish for a speedy
félicitations
recovery of
à
those who
notre
are
briefeur
injured.
du
We'd
jour
like
de ce
to
matin,
also
M.
thank today's
Wanson,
briefer, Mr. Kim
de son exposé
Won-soo,
clair et
for his
objectif.
clear and
Et aussi
objective briefing,
du fait qu'il ait pris
and
la précaution
also commend the
de
fact that he
s'enquérir
took
le plus largement
the
possible, y
precaution
compris
to
auprès des représentants des autorités
consult
syriennes ici à New York.
as widely as he could with Syrian
Le communiqué
authorities
publié
here
hier
in
par l'Organisation
New
pour
York as
l'interdiction
well.
des armes chimiques, OIAC,
The
qui a déjà entrepris de rassembler, d'analyser les informations
OPCW, which
de
has
toutes les
sought
sources
to
disponibles
gather
afin de
all
situer les
information from
responsabilités,
all sources
procède
possible,
également de ce
and the
même souci
GEM
de
is
précaution. Madame la
operating under the
Présidente, comme nous l'avions
same
rappelé
careful
ici même le
precaution.
28
As you
février
reminded
dernier,
us on the 28th
rien
of February,
ne peut
Madam
justifier
President,
une atrocité
nothing can
telle que
justify
l'usage de
an
produits chimiques
atrocity
comme
such
arme,
as the one
en tout temps,
resulting from the use of
et en
chemical
tout lieu,
weapons, regardless of
y
where
compris
and when,
en Syrie,
including in Syria,
zone de conflit, surtout
area
contre
of
des populations
conflict,
civiles.
and especially when used
C'est la
against the
raison pour
civilian
laquelle
population. It's for
le
this
Sénégal,
reason
fidèle
that
à ses
Senegal,
positions en principe,
in keeping with its
et en sa
position
qualité
of
d'État
principle
partie à
and
la
in its
Convention
capacity
sur les armes
of a
chimiques,
state party to
réitère par ma
the
voix
CWC,
sa
would
ferme
like through me to
condamnation
reiterate
de
its
l'emploi
strong
de toutes sortes d'armes de
condemnation
destruction
of the use of
massive,
any kind
y
of
compris
weapon
les armes
of
chimiques,
mass destruction,
comme
including
ce
chemical
qui est
weapons,
arrivé hier
as we
à
saw
Idlib,
take place
en
yesterday
Sheikhoum.
in Idlib, in Khan
Madame la
Sheikhoum.
Présidente, cette
Madam
énième
President,
barbarie dans
this
l'interminable guerre
umpteenth
et
act
les
of
allégations dans l'interminable
barbary
guerre
in
en Syrie
this endless
et les
war
allégations
in
continues
Syria
d'usage
and
d'armes
the
chimiques dans ce
ongoing
pays
allegations of the use of chemical
démontrent,
weapons
si
in that
besoin
country
était
show,
encore,
if
toute la
we
pertinence du
need
mécanisme
further
d'enquête
evidence
conjoint
of
ONU,
the need
OIAC.
for
En
the
cette
continued
circonstance,
use of
nous
the
renouvelons aux
UN
membres
OPCW
de l'équipe de
GEM.
direction
We therefore would
tous
like
nos
to
encouragements
renew
dans leurs
our
efforts pour situer
encouragement for
de
all
façon
efforts geared
objective
towards
et
objectively
impartiale
and
en application des
impartially
résolutions 2235
enforcing
de
resolution
2015 et
2235 of
2319 de
2015 and
2016 les
2334
responsabilités
of
sur
2016
l'utilisation
to
inacceptable de ces
ascertain
substances
the
chimiques comme
accountability
armes.
for the use of these
Le
unacceptable
plus essentiel
weapons.
est la poursuite des consultations entre
We
le
must
secrétariat
continue
de
consultations
l'OIAC et
between
les autorités syriennes
the
compétentes afin que
OPCW
l'équipe
and the Syrian authorities
d'évaluation
to
des
ensure
déclarations
that the
FMM de son sigle en anglais
FFM
puisse exécuter
can
convenablement sa mission.
carry out its mission.
Comment ne pas s'inquiéter à nouveau
How can
de
we
voir
not be
des
worried
acteurs
once
non
again to
étatiques,
see
à l'instar des groupes terroristes
non-state
tels que l'État
actors
islamique
like
et l'ex-Front Nusra disposer de ces armes
Islamic
terribles?
State
Voilà
use
pourquoi
these weapons.
nous
And
en
it's for this
appelons à
reason
nouveau
that we
à
once
une meilleure
again would like to
coopération
call
entre tous
for
les États membres, en particulier ceux de
renewed
la
cooperation
région,
among all member
afin de
states,
mettre
especially
un
those in
terme
that
à la
region, to
menace
put an
permanente
end to the
que
ongoing
constituent les
threat
armes chimiques en
of
Syrie
chemical
et
weapons
au-delà.
in Syria and beyond.
Ma délégation réitère
My
à tous les
delegation
membres du Conseil de
wishes to
sécurité
reiterate to all members of the Security
son appel
Council
pour un
our
retour à
call
l'esprit de
for a
consensus et de coopération
return to
qui avait
consensus
prévalu
and
lors de
cooperation,
l'adoption
which
des
prevailed
résolutions
when we
21-18
adopted
en
resolution
2013 et de
2118 in
22-35
2013 and
en 2015.
2235 in
Par ces
2015.
décisions, faut-il
Through
le
these
rappeler,
decisions, I need
notre
not
Conseil a
remind
pu
you,
faire
our
des progrès
council was
tangibles
able to
en matière de prise
give
en charge de
tangible
l'arsenal
evidence
chimique
of
déclaré par les
dealing with the declared chemical weapons arsenals.
d'œuvrer à
Syria. It is
l'unisson
now
pour
up
donner la
to
suite
the
appropriée aux
Security Council
résultats
to give
substantiels des
appropriate
investigations mises en
follow-up
œuvre
to
par
the
l'équipe de
substantive
direction du
findings
mécanisme
of
d'enquête conjointe,
the GIM,
dont la complexité de la tâche est
and
reconnue
its
de
task
tous.
is a very complex
In
one,
fine,
which
Madame la
everyone will
Présidente,
recognize.
notre conviction
In
est
closing,
que seule
Madam
une
President, our
solution
conviction is that
politique
only a
négociée,
political negotiated
notamment sur la
solution
base du communiqué de Genève
based in
et de la
particular
résolution
on the Geneva
2254 de
Communique and
2015
Resolution
peut permettre
21,
de parvenir
the
à une
relevant
issue définitive à ce conflit
resolution will help
aux
us to
conséquences
achieve a lasting
humanitaires
solution to this,
dévastatrices
which is
et faire
causing
toute la
devastating
lumière sur les
humanitarian
allégations d'usage
ravages.
d'armes prohibées
And
en Syrie.
we must look into any alleged
C'est la raison
use
pour
of
laquelle ma
chemical weapons in
délégation
Syria. And it's for this reason that my
renouvelle ses vœux de
delegation
succès au cinquième round des
renews
pourparlers
its
de
wish
Genève,
for the
ouvert le
success
23 mars
in the second
2017,
round of
avec
Geneva
l'espoir
talks, which began on the 23rd
qu'avec
of
le
March.
processus
And it's our
d'Astana,
hope that the
il pourra
Astana
consolider les
process will
conclusions
also
substantielles de la quatrième session
strengthen
qui
the
avait permis
substantive findings
d'aboutir
of the
pour la
fourth session,
première
which
fois
helped
les
us for
questions
the
de fond
first time to
telles
get
que
to
les
the
réformes
substantive issues
constitutionnelles,
such as
la
constitutional
transition
reform,
politique et la
political
tenue des
transition,
élections sous
and
supervision
holding
des Nations Unies.
UN-supervised
Dans
elections.
l'intervalle, Madame la Présidente,
In the interim,
le
Madam
Sénégal en
President,
appelle
Senegal
à un établissement rapide et
calls
fiable
for
de ce qui est
quick
arrivé hier
and reliable
à Idlib.
assessment of
Sénégal
what
en
took
appelle
place
aussi
in
à une
Idlib yesterday,
détermination
and we also call
rapide
for
et fiable des
swift
auteurs,
and reliable
aux équipes
identification
du
of the
FMM
perpetrators,
déjà à
and
pied
for
d'œuvre,
the
ainsi qu'à celles du GIM qui attendent leur conclusion
and
pour chuter les
GIM,
responsabilités. Le
which is
Sénégal
awaiting
par
its
ma voix
conclusions.
renouvelle tout son soutien.
We would like
Je vous
to
remercie.
reiterate our support for all these entities. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you to the representative of Senegal, and now we will give the floor to the representative from the Russian Federation.
Благодарю вас, госпожа председатель. Мы признательны делегации Соединенных Штатов за возможность в открытом формате и откровенно обсудить животрепещущую тему использования отравляющих веществ в контексте сирийского конфликта. Интерес к таким событиям, к сожалению, носит ярко выраженную идеологическую окраску. Он тесно вплетен, признаем прямо, он тесно вплетен в канву антидамасской кампании, которая никак не доберется до своего заслуженного места на свалке истории. Когда же только появляются ноты реализма, когда начинает набирать динамику политический процесс в Астане, в Женеве, тогда по интересной закономерности происходят разного рода инциденты. Последний пример – трагедия в Хан-Шейхуне. По нашим данным, сирийская сторона обращается в техсекретариат ОСХО с просьбой о направлении в Сирию миссии по установлению фактов для расследования данного инцидента, а также миссии ОСХО быстрого реагирования и помощи. Нет нужды повторять, что Российская Федерация придерживается четкой и однозначной позиции. Использование химического оружия, кем бы то ни было, абсолютно недопустимо. Ни при каких обстоятельствах. Виновные в совершении подобных преступлений должны быть привлечены к ответственности. Коснемся генезиса проблем. Водоразделом в истории с применением в Сирии токсичных химикатов, а затем уже и полноценных отравляющих веществ, послужили инициированные предыдущей администрацией США так называемые «красные линии», за пересечением которых должно было бы последовать военное вмешательство во внутрисирийский конфликт. Данное решение послужило отправной точкой для последующих провокаций террористических и экстремистских структур с использованием химоружия. Они стремились дискредитировать официальный Дамаск и дать повод для применения военной силы против суверенного государства. Тогда наши западные партнеры предпочитали отмалчиваться, в том числе с поступившим от Дамаска в марте 2013 года запросом на расследование применения боевиками Зарина в пригороде Алеппо Хан-Аль-Асаде. Надеемся, что этого на этот раз не повторится.
al-Assad. We hope that this kind of
Именно
attitude
это
will not be
бездействие
repeated this
подвигло
time. It was this
чувствующих
inaction
свою
that
безнаказанность боевиков на
encouraged
более
the
масштабную
insurgents
акцию
who
21
felt
августа
their impunity,
2013 года в
and
Восточной Гуте,
they committed a
когда вновь был применен
more,
Зарин.
a more significant action on
Кстати
the
говоря,
21st of August
эта
of
акция была
2013 in
приурочена,
Eastern Ghouta
когда я
when
сказал
they
про
used
интересную
sarin.
закономерность.
And by the way,
Первой миссии
quite
в Сирию
coincidentally,
группы с профессором
that
Сёльстроном
attack was timed to coincide in the first
пытались
visit
возложить
of
ответственность
the
за атаку
expert
на
group
правительственные
led by
войска.
Professor
Не получилось,
Sellström.
потому что
Now,
благодаря проявленной Дамаском доброй воли,
Damascus
совместным
showed
усилиям России и
sufficient good
США
faith
при
at the
поддержке
time,
мирового
and through
сообщества,
the efforts of
основные
Russia and the
цели по
United
химической
States and the international
демилитаризации
community,
Сирии
it
удалось
was
успешно
possible to
реализовать.
achieve a successful chemical
Когда стало
demilitarization
очевидным, что
of Syria.
правительство Асада и беспрецедентно
Now, when
сжатые
it
сроки
became clear
и в
that the
сложнейших
government
условиях
of
вооруженного
Assad,
конфликта справилась с задачей
in very complex
ликвидации
conditions
своих
and in very,
химических арсеналов,
brief time frames,
последовали
was able to,
информационные вбросы
eliminate their
о применении
chemical
в Сирии
arsenals.
хлора в
What we
качестве
saw
химоружия.
was reports
С учетом
about the
данного
so-called use
обстоятельства
in Syria
согласия
of
Дамаска
chlorine as chemical
была
weapons.
учреждена миссия по установлению
Now,
фактов,
a
УСХО,
fact-finding mission was established by
призванная
the
оперативно
OPCW with the
реагировать
support of
на
the
такого рода
government of
инциденты.
Damascus, which was meant
Но на деле
to
эта миссия
react to these
ни
kinds of
разу не
incidents. But
посетила
in
места
fact,
предполагаемого
this
применения хлора
mission never
для
visited
проверки.
the sites where chlorine was used to
Было положено
verify
начало
this.
порочной
And so
практики
poor
в работе
foundation
миссии
was
по
laid in
установлению
the
фактов,
work of the
а затем
fact-finding
и
mission, and
совместного
then of the
механизма
joint
по
investigative
расследованию
mechanism
случаев применения в Сирии химоружия,
on
когда
the
за чистую монету
investigating cases of
стали
the use of
приниматься
chemical weapons in
сфабрикованные
Syria.
сирийской оппозицией
In fact,
и сочувствующими
reports
ей НПО
fabricated
сведения
by the
о
Syrian
мнимом
opposition
использовании
and
хлора
NGOs
правительственными
supporting
войсками,
it about
об
alleged use
объективном
of chlorine
расследовании
by government
никто даже не
forces.
помышляет.
These reports were taken at face value, and no one
Если у
sought
кого-то
to
остаются
conduct an
сомнения в том,
objective
что кадры
investigation. If
предполагаемых
anyone
инцидентов, в
has
частности в
any
Сармении,
doubts that the
были заранее срежиссированы,
images of the so-called use of
достаточно
Sarmen
обратиться
were
к видеорядам,
staged
заснятым
in
по данному
advance,
сюжету.
it's enough to look at the
Псевдогуманитарные
videos
организации,
of
которые
that
некоторые
were
в этом зале прославляли
that
белые
were
каски, так и
filmed
Нусрой,
by certain NGOs, such as
в которых
White
фигурируют
Helmets,
одни и те же
which
актеры-корреспонденты.
which were praised by everyone
Налицо
in
тот
this,
факт, что
in
белокасочники
this room. And in these
тесно
videos, you see
связаны
the same
с этой
actors
террористической
that are
организацией.
so-called correspondents.
А может быть, фабрикацией
And so
материалов
these white helmets seem
занимались
to be
те,
closely
кто,
linked to the
крича о
terrorist
гуманитарной
organizations.
катастрофе в
Or maybe
Восточном
those who
Алеппо
fabricated
забивал
these
склады в
materials
этой
were
части
the same
города
that were
медикаментами и продуктами,
exaggerating about the
когда население
humanitarian
голодало.
catastrophe in eastern Aleppo,
Я
while they
спросил
were
их здесь
busy
вон,
filling
это
their
правда? Они сказали, да,
warehouses
правда.
with
Почему?
medication,
Потому что готовились
medication
якобы
and
к
food.
долгосрочной осаде. Вы представляете себе
They
уровень
were
цинизма?
getting ready
Вот кто
for
дает
a
материалы.
long-term siege. Can you believe the degree of cynicism?
И на этих материалах нужно делать
Those are
выводы.
the organizations who provide video materials for this, and these video materials should serve as a basis for us to draw conclusions.
Эксперты УСХО
The experts
подтвердили,
of the OPCW
что такие
have
террористические
confirmed that
группировки,
these
как
kinds of terrorist
Исламское
groups,
государство,
such as
Нусра,
Islamic
производят полноценные
State and
боевые,
al-Nusra,
отравляющие
produce
вещества
fully
и
fledged
притезарин,
weaponized
регулярно
chemical
применяют
substances,
в
mustard
Сирии
gas
и
and
в Ираке.
sarin, which are regularly used in
Кстати, с такими
Syria and
выводами
Iraq. And by the way,
согласно и
these kinds of
западное разведывательное сообщество.
the Western intelligence community also
Мы
agrees with these kinds of
неоднократно
conclusions.
аргументировали
We
нашу
have
позицию в
often
СБ
argued our
относительно
position in the
предварительных
Security
результатов
Council regarding
расследования по линии
preliminary
совместного
outcome
механизма расследования.
of investigations in the
Во
framework of the
многом еще
GIM.
предстоит разобраться.
Much
Именно поэтому
needs to
мы
be
согласились на продление мандата
examined. This
механизма
is
еще на
why
1
we
год.
agreed to extend
Должно
the
быть
mandate of the
проведено
GIM for another
тщательное
year.
и
We need
деполитизированное
to
расследование
conduct a
случаев
thorough,
применения химоружия,
depoliticized
опирающееся
investigation of
на
cases of the use
достоверные
of chemical
и
weapons based
проверенные факты.
on reliable and verified facts.
Последующая деятельность механизма должна быть расширена
Work
географически.
of the GIM needs to
Его
be
мандат
expanded
должен быть наполнен
geographically. Its
реальным
mandate needs to be
антитеррористическим
filled
содержанием,
with a
что
real
предусматривается
anti-terrorist content,
резолюцией СБ ООН.
which
И
is
не надо нас ссорить с
provided
правительством
for
Ирака и
by
другими региональными
by
странами.
a resolution of the
Не надо
Security
нас ссорить.
Council. And we should
У
not
нас в регионе
be
Ближнего Востока прочные
you know,
позиции.
we have good
Нам
relations
доверяют.
with Iraq
И
and
то, что
other
мы
states of the
делаем, это в
region.
помощь Багдаду, а не против него, как вы утверждаете.
People believe us, people rely
Должны
on
быть
us, and
рамки
what we're
какого-то
doing is
приличия.
to support Baghdad, and so you shouldn't, and the government of Iraq, and you should not try to
Глубоко обеспокоены тем, что некоторые государства уже сейчас манипулируют предварительными итогами деятельности совместного механизма расследования. Апофеозом такого безответственного подхода стало вынесение на голосование 28 февраля проекта санкционной резолюции по главе 7 Устава. Причем на фоне, когда политический процесс восстания в Женеве очень успешно работал. Вы создали искусственную провокацию. Даже не удосужившись пояснить, с какой целью вы ставите его на голосование. Проблема химического терроризма остается. И если бы 2 года назад внимательно отнеслись бы к российско-китайской инициативе по соответствующему проекту резолюции, сегодня ситуация была бы радикально иной. Нет проигнорирования. Теперь, отвечая на вопрос посла Великобритании господина Райфорта, есть ли у России план? Есть и не один. Есть и не один. Первый план, конечно, бороться с терроризмом. Второй план касательно вашей резолюции. Особой необходимости в принятии резолюции на данном этапе мы не видим. Ранее принятые решения вполне достаточны для проведения тщательного расследования инцидента. Но если кому-то из членов СБ новая резолюция представляется желательной, необходимой, она должна выглядеть совершенно иначе. В преамбуле нужно было бы указать, что Совет с глубокой озабоченностью встретил сообщение о массовой гибели людей в результате отравления химвеществами в Хан-Шейхуне. В преамбуле же указать, что это диктует необходимость проведения полноценного расследования с целью выяснения, что на самом деле произошло и кто несет ответственность. Постановляющую часть в преамбуле также надо осудить применение химоружия кем бы то ни было. Постановляющую часть следовало бы ограничить одним пунктом, призывом миссии установлению фактов в полном объеме расследовать на месте сообщения об инциденте при обязательном условии, что персональный состав следователей будет представлен СБ на рассмотрение и будет носить географически сбалансированный характер. Здесь же следует посмотреть требования вооруженным группировкам, незаконным вооруженным формированиям, контролирующим район инцидента, предоставить полный и безопасный доступ следователям к местности и необходимой им информации. Главная задача сейчас — объективно разобраться в том, что произошло, пока же все фальсифицированные сообщения на эту тему исходят из упомянутых мной ранее белых касок и базирующейся в Лондоне Сирийской консерватории по правам человека. Эти структуры, впрочем, давно и напрочь себя дискредитировали, принимать на основе их сообщений какие-либо далеко идущие решения непрофессионально нельзя. Отмечаем одновременно противоречивый характер поступающих сообщений об инциденте. Белые каски путаются в показаниях. Все время меняют версию произошедшего. Говорят о бомбардировках то ли с вертолетов, то ли с самолетов. Заявляют то о применении хлора, то зарина. Меняют данные о количестве пострадавших на видео и фотоматериалах, размещенных в социальных сетях. Видно,
video
что
and
помощь
photo
пострадавшим
materials that have
оказывают
been released
представители белых
in the
касок,
social media,
не имеющих
we
надежных
see
средств защиты
representatives
и
of white
действующих
helmets
крайне непрофессионально,
taking these photos or
обращает на
videos,
себя
and
внимание
they're acting
слишком
very
спокойное
unprofessionally.
поведение
Also, the fact
представителей
that
данной организации
the
в
behavior
чрезвычайных условиях.
of these
Это создает твердое
representatives of white
впечатление
helmets in extreme
о
circumstances, their
постановочном
behavior is
характере видеоматериалов.
very relaxed, which
Вся затея
brings one
носит явно
to question
провокационный
the
характер.
plausibility of these
Кстати
materials.
говоря,
All this clearly
упомянутые противоречия нашли
has
отражение
a
и в
provocative character,
представленном
is meant to
проекте
provoke
резолюции.
it. And all this,
Например, в пункте
unfortunately,
2
has
преамбулы выражается
been
ужас
reflected in
в
the
связи с
resolution. In
инцидентом,
paragraph 2 of the
который подается
preamble part, for
как
example, expresses the
установленный
horror
факт.
of what happened, as
При этом
though
в пункте
this
3
was an
постановляющей части
established
ставится
fact.
задача
Paragraph 3 of
установить,
the operative part
а имел ли вообще
states
место
that we
данный
need to
инцидент.
establish whether
Ну, вы
this
смотрите, что пишете.
event took
Иными
place.
словами, проект готовился в спешке
Have you even checked what you
и
wrote?
отличается
In
крайне
other words,
небрежно, скажем прямо.
this draft was
Предлагать Совету
prepared in a hasty
Безопасности
way
одобрить такой текст, ну,
not
просто
thoroughly at
неприлично.
all. So to adopt a text like that would be
Что касается предполагаемого
would not be
инцидента,
very serious for
произошедшего
the
на
Security
территории,
Council. Now, as for
которая
the
с
alleged incident that
2014
has
года
taken place on territory
контролируется
that has been controlled since
террористами из Нусры,
2014 by terrorists
то
from al-Nusra,
действительно в
well,
период
it's
с
true that
11:30
from
до 12:30 местного
to
времени
12:30 local
4
time
апреля
on the 4th of April,
сирийская авиация
the Syrian
нанесла
aviation
удар в
conducted
районе
an
восточной
airstrike
окраины Хан-Шейхуна
in the
по
eastern
крупному складу
edge of
боеприпасов
Han-Sheikhun on
и
a
скоплению
large
военной
warehouse
техники.
of ammunition and military
На территории этого склада
equipment.
находились
On the
цеха
territory
по
of
производству
that warehouse,
фугасов,
there
начиняемых
were
отравляющими веществами.
there was a
Фугасы эти
facility to produce
предназначались для использования
ammunition
на
with the
территории
use of
Ирака, а также
toxic
в
weapons.
Алеппо.
Those were supposed to be,
Их применение
that
в
ammunition was
одноименной
supposed to be
провинции было
used
зафиксировано
in
в конце
Iraq
прошлого
and in
года
Aleppo.
российскими военными
Their
специалистами.
use was confirmed last year by
Симптомы
Russian
отравления в
military experts.
Хан-Шейхуне
The
на
symptoms
видеокадрах в соцсетях точно
those
такие,
affected
как
in
были осенью прошлого
Han-Sheikhun were
года
the same
в
as
Алеппо,
those
когда все факты
by people
применения
who were
химоружия
affected
вместе с
last year in Aleppo,
отобранными в этом городе пробами грунта
when
были запротоколированы
all
и переданы в
of the
Москву,
information
где они до сих пор
regarding the use of those
продолжают изучаться.
chemical
Ни
substances
шатка, ни валка.
was collected and forwarded to
Очевидно
the
для нас
OPCW,
одно,
where they
что
continued
химический
to be
терроризм
examined. What is
набирает
clear to
обороты,
us
ему
is
надо
that chemical
противодействовать
terrorism is
самым решительным
increasing
образом.
and it needs to be
К
countered
сожалению,
as
все наши
decisively as
попытки
possible.
добиться
Unfortunately,
в
all our
последние 3
attempts
года реакции со
for the
стороны
past
Совета
3 years to
Безопасности
get the
на
Security Council
преступления
to react
террористов,
to
все более регулярно
react to the
применяющих
crimes
оружие,
of
не увенчались
terrorists who are
успехом
using chemical weapons more and more
из-за
frequently have
позиции
not led
западных
to
коллег.
success due to the opposition of Western colleagues.
Что они и
It is
совершенно
quite
равнодушно
typical that they
отнеслись к последней вылазке
that
террористов
were
в
completely
Масуле.
indifferent
А
to
этот
the
факт
recent
был
actions of
подтвержден
terrorists in
такими
Mosul. And
авторитетными
this,
и
that
беспристрастными
fact was
международными
confirmed by
организациями,
such
как Красный Крест.
reputable and impartial international organizations as the Red Cross.
Я должен привлечь ваше
I
внимание
have
к
to draw
заявлению
your
генерального
attention
секретаря
to the
ООН.
statement of the Secretary General
Он
of the
призвал
UN.
тщательно разобраться
He
в
called
том,
for a
что
thorough
действительно
inquiry
произошло в Хан-Шейхуне.
into what really happened in
Мы такую позицию полностью
Sheikhun.
поддерживаем.
We fully support this kind of
Причем расследование
position.
должно быть полноценным
And
и
this
объективным.
investigation needs to be
И пора кончать
comprehensive
с
and
негодной
objective.
практикой
And we should put an end
дистанционных
to
следственных действий
the
на основе информации,
very poor
которую
practice
черпают
of
некоторые,
long
в том числе
distance
миссия по установлению
investigations
фактов,
based on
из
information
интернета и из опросов
that even the fact-finding
соседних
mission
с Сирией
uses
стран,
that often is taken
которые заведомо,
from the internet or from
эти данные
neighboring
заведомо
countries.
не поддаются доказательствам.
Information and reports and evidence that is questionable and
Любая
very
следственная
difficult to
структура,
prove.
в
Any
том числе миссия по установлению фактов,
body to
должна выехать
investigative body,
на место
including the
применения
fact-finding mission,
химоружия,
must actually visit, must go and visit the place where the
использовать
site
весь
where
спектр
the
соответствующих
incident
методик,
occurred,
включая
using broad
отбор
range of
проб, судебно-медицинскую
methodologies, including taking
и
samples,
криминалистическую экспертизу.
including using
На важность такого серьезного и профессионального
using
подхода
medical and legal
обращалось
experts.
внимание в четвертом
the
и
need for this
пятом
kind
докладах
of approach
совместного
was mentioned in
механизма
the
расследования.
fourth
Подскажу
and fifth
пункты
reports
49
of
и
the
11
GIM. By the way,
соответственно.
paragraph 49 and 11 of those reports specifically
Команда
mention that.
следователей, еще раз
The team
акцентирую,
of
должна носить по
investigators,
своему
once again I
составу
stress,
подлинно интернациональный характер
needs to be
в
truly
соответствии с
international
зафиксированным
in
в Уставе
character,
ООН принципов
in accordance
широкого
with the
географического
principles of
представительства.
broad
В
geographic
своем нынешнем виде миссия по
representation. In
установлению
its
фактов
current form, the
этому
fact-finding mission
основополагающему принципу
does not
совершенно
correspond to
не
this
отвечает.
founding principle at all.
Ее выводы нельзя назвать беспристрастными.
The conclusions of this
Еще хотел бы
fact-finding
сказать об
mission
одном.
cannot be called impartial. Another thing I wanted to say,
Абсолютно в очередной раз
once
абсолютно безответственное,
again, it's completely
неуважительное,
irresponsible.
непрофессиональное заявление постпреда Великобритании.
The statement and completely irresponsible and
Оно объясняется
lacking
тем,
in
что вы
respect.
ничего не
That
делаете
is the
для
statement by
нормализации
the
обстановки
United
в Сирии.
Kingdom, by the
Вы же ничего не
ambassador of the
делаете.
United Kingdom. It's explained by the fact that you're not doing anything about the situation. You're not.
Правда, делаете одно.
No, it's true. You are doing one
Вбрасываете
thing.
в СБ
You
провокационные проекты.
You are
Кстати говоря, вы
submitting
еще оказываете
drafts in the Security Council
одностороннее
that only
давление
provoke. Also,
на
another
совместный
thing you
механизм
do,
расследования,
you put
не скрывая
putting
при этом ваших
unilateral
действий,
pressure on the joint
выжимая
investigative mechanism
выводы, которые вам нужны.
without even hiding this, without trying to conceal this,
И
and trying
вообще,
to pressure it to
за рамками
produce facts that you
дипломатического
need.
приличия, господин Райкеров,
And Mr. Reichert,
ваши сентенции по России и
beyond
Китаю, это
diplomatic,
категорически
beyond the
неприемлемо.
norms of diplomatic
Повторяться этого не должно.
standards,
Слушать мы
your
этого больше
statements
не
about
будем.
China and Russia are unacceptable. This should
Вы
not be
лучше бы
repeated.
отчитались
We
о том,
won't accept it. We
что
won't hear
Великобритания
it. We won't
делает
listen to it.
в сфере урегулирования
You
обстановки в
should
Сирии.
account for answer for
Задаете
what
вопросы России и
Great Britain
Китаю.
is doing in contributing to
У вас-то
resolving the
какая-то
situation in
ответственность есть?
Syria. Do
Нет.
you carry any kind of responsibility? Do you have a sense of responsibility?
А все
No, you don't.
одержимость сменой режимов.
Everything is geared, everything is guided
Именно
by
эта одержимость сменой
the
режимов
need to change
мешает
regime change.
конструктивной работе
Even this
Совета Безопасности.
obsession with regime change is what
Это
hinders
вы
the work of the
пренебрегаете
Security
местом в Совете
Council.
Безопасности,
You,
поскольку пытаетесь
in
осветить
fact,
решением СБ
are
ваши незаконные планы.
trying
Не
to
получается и не получится, пока не
have
смените
the
пластинку.
Security Council give cover, a cover of legitimacy
И не
to
надо
your
пытаться нас
illegitimate
еще
plans.
раз ссорить с народами Сирии,
And you should not
Ирака
try
и
to
другими
introduce
народами
discord between
Ближнего
us and the
Востока.
people
Я
of
думал,
Syria,
что английская
or
дипломатия
people of Iraq
с
and
этими
other nations of the
рудиментарными
Middle East.
методами
I
давно
thought
рассталась.
that the
Вот над
diplomatic
этим
service of
предстоит
the
серьезно
United Kingdom
задуматься.
had
Повторяю,
long ago left
ни сирийский кризис, ни другие мировые проблемы,
abandoned these kinds
включая
of tactics.
агрессивный терроризм,
So
нам
once
не
again,
решить
I repeat
без
that
реального объединения усилий.
without
Мы
truly
коллективной
uniting our
работе
efforts and
готовы.
through collective
Спасибо,
action, we
госпожа
will not
председатель.
resolve the problem of the Syrian conflict or the problem of terrorism. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you to the representative of the Russian Federation. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of the United States. It was interesting to hear of the talk from my Russian colleague about the independent investigations and the importance of them, because this entire Security Council decided on what the joint investigative mechanism would be and decided what it would do, and it was actually voted on unanimously. And the joint mechanism came back and said that the Syrian government committed chemical weapons acts against their own people 3 different times. But somehow now we don't like what the joint investigative mechanism does. Having said that, I will say in the life of the United Nations, there are times when we are compelled to do more than just talk. There are times we are compelled to take collective action. This Security Council thinks of itself as a defender of peace, security, and human rights. We will not deserve that description if we do not rise to action today. Yesterday morning, we awoke to pictures, to children foaming at the mouth, suffering convulsions, being carried in the arms of desperate parents. We saw rows of lifeless bodies, some still in diapers, some with visible scars of a chemical weapons attack. Look at those pictures. We cannot close our eyes to those pictures. We cannot close our minds of the responsibility to act. We don't yet know everything about yesterday's attack, but there are many things we do know. We know that yesterday's attack bears all the hallmarks of the Assad regime's use of chemical weapons. We know that Assad had used these weapons against the Syrian people before. That was confirmed by this council's own independent team of investigators. We know that yesterday's attack was a new low, even for the barbaric Assad regime. Evidence reported from the scene indicates that Assad is now using even more lethal chemical agents than he did before. The gas that fell out of the sky yesterday was more deadly, leaving men, women, the elderly, and children gasping for their very last breath. And as first responders, doctors, and nurses rushed to help the victims, a second round of bombs rained down. They died in the same slow, horrendous manner as the civilians they were trying to save. We all also know this. Just a few weeks ago, this council attempted to hold Assad accountable for suffocating his own people to death with toxic chemicals. Russia stood in the way of this accountability. They made an unconscionable choice. They chose to close their eyes to the barbarity. They defied the conscience of the world. Russia cannot escape responsibility for this. In fact, if Russia had been fulfilling its responsibility, there would not even be any chemical weapons left for the Syrian regime to use. There is one more thing we know. We know that if nothing is done, these attacks will continue. Assad has no incentive to stop using chemical weapons as long as Russia continues to protect his regime from consequences. I implore my colleagues to take a hard look at their words in this council. We regularly repeat tired talking points in support of a peace process that is regularly undermined by the Assad regime. Time and time again, Russia uses the same false narrative to deflect attention from their allies in Damascus. Time and time again, without any factual basis, Russia attempts to place blame on others. There is an obvious truth here that must be spoken. The truth is that Assad, Russia, and Iran have no interest in peace. The illegitimate Syrian government, led by a man with no conscience, has committed untold atrocities against his people for more than 6 years. Assad has made it clear that he doesn't want to take part in a meaningful political process. Iran has reinforced Assad's military, and Russia has shielded Assad from UN sanctions. If Russia has the influence in Syria that it claims to have, we need to see them use it. We need to see them put an end to these horrific acts. How many more children have to die before Russia cares? The United States sees yesterday's attack as a disgrace at the highest level, an assurance that humanity means nothing to the Syrian government. The question members of this council must ask themselves is this: if we are not able to enforce resolutions preventing the use of chemical weapons, what does that say for our chances of ending the broader conflict in Syria? What does that say of our ability to bring relief to the Syrian people? If we are not able to enforce resolutions preventing the use of chemical weapons, what does that say about our effectiveness in this institution? If we are not prepared to act, then this council will keep meeting month after month to express outrage at the continuing use of chemical weapons, and it will not end. We will see more conflict in Syria. We will see more pictures that we can never unsee. I began my remarks by saying that in the life of the United Nations, there are times when we are compelled to take collective action. I will now add this. When the United Nations consistently fails in its duty to act collectively, there are times in the life of states that we are compelled to take our own action. For the sake of the victims, I hope the rest of the Council is finally willing to do the same. The world needs to see the use of chemical weapons and the fact that they will not be tolerated. Thank you. I will now resume my function as the President of the Council, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
السيد الرئيس
Madam
إن ما
President,
سمعناه من البعض داخل هذا المجلس
some members of the Council today
دليل إضافي
made statements that proved even further
ودامغ على أن بلاد سوريا
unequivocally
تتعرض
that my country,
لعدوانين
Syria,
متزامنين.
is victim
الأول
of two aggressions
تشنه داخل هذا
simultaneously.
المجلس
First,
دول
an
دائمة العضوية.
attack by permanent
والثاني
members of this
تنفذه
council.
نيابة عن
The
هذه
second
الدول
is a
مجموعات
proxy
إرهابية
attack
مسلحة
by
داخل
armed
سوريا
terrorist groups
تعمل
in Syria
لصالحها
that are
وتأتمر بأمرها.
operating by
ويبدو أن الفريق
instructions of
الثلاثي
these
استعاد اليوم
member states,
شهيته
permanent member states.
لتكرار الأكاذيب
They
والقصص
both
الملفقة
seem to have an appetite
التي
for
مارسها بعض الأعضاء
falsification
الدائمين
and
منذ أكثر من 10
fabrication
سنوات
by permanent
في هذه
members of
القاعة
this council.
لتدمير
These
العراق
are
واحتلاله
practices for more than
بناء
10
على
years in this
كذبة
council.
أسلحة
It
الدمار
started
الشامل.
with a lie
السيد
against
الرئيس
Iraq when it comes to weapons
بداية
of mass
تنفي حكومة
destruction
بلادي
in Iraq.
بشكل مطلق
First, we categorically
المزاعم
reject
والاتهامات الكاذبة
false claims
حول
and
استخدام الجيش
accusations
العربي
on
السوري
the use
لمواد
of
كيميائية
the
سامة ضد
Syrian
المدنيين
Arab army
السوريين
of
في
toxic
منطقة خان
chemicals
شيخون
against Syrian
الذين
civilians in Khan
تحتجزهم
Sheikhoun.
الجماعات
These
الإرهابية
are
المسلحة كدروع
used
بشرية
as
هناك.
human shields by
كما
the armed
تؤكد
terrorist
سوريا
groups. Syria
أن
also
الجيش
reaffirms
العربي
that
السوري
the Syrian
ليس
Arab army
لديه أي
does
نوع
not
من أنواع
have
الأسلحة
any
الكيميائية
form
ولم
or type
يستخدمها
of chemical
سابقا
weapons. We have
ولن
never used
يستخدمها
them
لاحقا.
and we will never use them.
إن موقف حكومة بلادي مبدئي
My
وثابت
government has a
في رفض
principled and firm
وإدانة جريمة
position
استخدام
that
الأسلحة
rejects the crime
الكيميائية
of use of
وأي
chemical
نوع من
weapons
أنواع
and
أسلحة
any
الدمار
form
الشامل
of weapons
من
of mass
قبل أي
destruction
كان
by
وفي
any
أي
party
مكان
regardless of
وتحت أي
where,
ظرف
when
كان
and what
ولأي سبب كان
circumstance and justification.
باعتباره جريمة
This is
ضد
a crime
الإنسانية
against humanity
وأمرا مرفوضا
and
وغير أخلاقي
unethical,
لا يمكن تبريره تحت
unjustifiable,
أي ظرف كان. وانطلاقا
and
من هذه
these
المبادئ
are
الثابتة
firm principles.
فقد انضمت حكومة بلادي
We
إلى
use
معاهدة
them
حظر
to
الأسلحة الكيميائية
join the OPCW,
ونفذت كل
the
التزاماتها
OPCW.
بموجب اتفاقية الحظر
We honored all our
إيمانا منها
obligations under
بالسعي
the
لإخلاء
convention
منطقة الشرق الأوسط
because we
من
believe that
كافة
the
أسلحة
Middle
الدمار
East should
الشامل
be a
كما تعاملت
WMD-free zone.
بمسؤولية عالية
We
وشفافية
have
كاملة في
shown
إطار الاتفاق
full
الثلاثي
responsibility and
الموقع
transparency
بينها
in
وبين
the
منظمة حظر
framework
الأسلحة
of the
الكيميائية
agreement
ومكتب الأمم
between my
المتحدة
country,
لخدمات
the
المشاريع.
OPCW
إن
and
إطلاق
UNOPS.
اتهامات جزافية ومسيسة ضد بلادي
Baseless
سوريا
politicized
وحلفائها في
accusations
الحرب
were
على
leveled against
الإرهاب
my country,
منذ اللحظة
Syria, and
الأولى
its allies in our
لتناقل
war against
وسائل
terror.
الإعلام تقارير
This
مصدرها
was the case
مجموعات
since day
إرهابية
one, as
مسلحة
the media
تم إدراجها على
have
لوائح مجلس
reported
الأمن للكيانات الإرهابية وعن
information
استهداف
that
منطقة خان
is
شيخون يؤكد
provided by terrorist groups that are designated by the Council, especially in Khan Sheikhoun. This affirms that certain parties inside this Council, with Turkey and other countries, will continue their politicized and dangerous practices that blackmail my government and its allies and seeks to tarnish their reputation in our war against terror. And they seek to obstruct the talks in Asatana and Geneva and to end all prospects of a political solution of the crisis, even if this is at the expense of children and women who are innocent victims of the terrorism that threatens Syria and the whole world today. This includes the role of the governments of some countries that are now forming a choir to accuse Syria without justification so that they would send the dossier of chemical weapons of Syria to square one to serve clear political objectives. This seeks to thwart the openness to Syria, which started to take shape recently. The head of the delegation of my country in the Geneva talks did express to Mr. Mistura on the 31st of March 2017 that Syria is concerned about reports that speak of the possession of armed terrorist groups in the rural areas of Damascus, Idlib and Hamat of chemical toxic material so that they would be used as weapons against civilians. He warned against the fabrication of evidence and falsification and any accusation against my country, as was the case before. I would like to remind this Council that my government has sent more than 90 letters, the most recent of which was 2 days ago, to the Council and the 1540 Committee and the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs and the JIM and the OPCW. All these letters included documented information on the possession of armed terrorist groups, namely Daesh and ISIL, of toxic chemicals that they have possessed through the Turkish territory.
هذا التزامن المشبوه الذي يتكرر دوما بين شن حملات اتهام سياسية ضدها في حوادث مزعومة ضد المدنيين وبين انعقاد اجتماعات دولية حول الوضع في سوريا أو انعقاد محادثات بين الأطراف السورية في أستانا وجنيف وهو الأمر الذي يترافق بطبيعة الحال مع استمرار بعض الدول الأعضاء في هذا المجلس في عملية الاستغلال السياسي الرخيص لتقارير مفبركة صادرة عن مؤسسات إعلامية مرتبطة بأجهزة استخبارات هذه الدول من أجل إلقاء تهم سياسية دون أي إعمال دون إعمال أي نوع من أنواع المحاكمة المنطقية أو انتظار بيان الصورة الحقيقية لما جرى أو حتى التفكير ولو لدقائق بمن هو المستفيد الحقيقي من استخدام المواد الكيميائية السامة بحق المدنيين الأبرياء. إن الجواب واضح أمامكم اليوم. فالمستفيد الأول هو ذات أنظمة الدول التي استهدفت سوريا منذ أكثر من 6 سنوات حتى الآن والتي تحاول الآن إنقاذ الجماعات الإرهابية المسلحة وجماعات المعارضة المتحالفة معها للهروب من استحقاقات العملية السياسية التي تجري في جنيف وأستانا. والسيناريو الذي تشهدونه اليوم ضد بلاد سوريا داخل مجلس الأمن هو التفسير الوحيد لتصريحات رئيس مجلس الأمن خلال الشهر الماضي آذار والتي أعلن فيها أنه سيتصدى لأي محاولة أو مشروع قرار تقدمه روسيا الاتحادية أو الصين من أجل فتح ملف حيازة الجماعات الإرهابية المسلحة في سوريا والعراق للأسلحة الكيميائية. إن المفارقة الكبرى تتمثل في أن تدعو فرنسا إلى عقد هذه الجلسة اليوم وهي الدولة التي فبركت بتوجيهات من وزير الخارجية الفرنسي السابق لوران فابيوس حادثة استخدام المواد الكيميائية السامة في الغوطة الشرقية بريف دمشق في شهر آب 2013 وهذه معلومات موثقة في كتاب الصحفيين الفرنسيين مالبرونو وشينو المعنون الطرق إلى دمشق. كما أن فرنسا هي الدولة المسؤولة سياسياً وقانونيا واخلاقيا مع شركائها داخل ما يسمى التحالف الدولي غير الشرعي عن قصف المدنيين وتدمير البنى التحتيه في مختلف مناطق سوريا. ولا اجد ضررا في تذكير هذا المجلس بالمجزره الوحشيه التي اقترفتها فرنسا الطيران الحربي الفرنسي بحق 200 من المدنيين في قريه طوخان الكبرى بريف حلب في تموز 2016 وبالعمليات الجويه الاخيره لطيران ما يسمى التحالف الدولي في الرقه ودير الزور والتي ادت إلى مقتل العشرات من المدنيين وإلى تدمير الجسور والبنى التحتية وإلحاق أضرار هائلة في صد الطبقة بما يهدد بوقوع كارثة بشرية وبيئية هناك. ختاما وإذ ترفض حكومة بلادي رفضا تاما تزوير الحقائق وفبركة الاتهامات فإنها تؤكد استمرارها في تنفيذ جميع تعهداتها التي التزمت بها حين انضمامها إلى اتفاقية حظر الأسلحة الكيميائية وفي حربها على الإرهاب التي لن تتوقف تحت تأثير أي ابتزاز سياسي أو إعلامي أو استغلال رخيص بدماء الأبرياء في سوريا. شكرا
I acknowledge the statement of the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic. There are no more speakers on the list of speakers, so this meeting is adjourned.